Hello, in today's video, we're going to be talking about lies we Africans tell ourselves and the devastating result of believing these lies. A lie is created or told to elicit a certain action or inaction, a certain result. I know some of you are asking, this is a business channel. What is a subject matter like this doing on a business channel? And the truth of the matter is this, that businesses don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in a social environment. They exist in a country. They exist in people's lives. Businesses, people create businesses. So lies affect businesses. It affects the rate of business creation. It affects who starts a business and who doesn't start a business. It affects business in many, many ways. So it's very, very important that we address this thing. What are these lies? But before I get into that, let me first ask, if you have not subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Secondly, we ask that you like this video. It doesn't cost you anything and it helps us a lot. You're telling YouTube this video is important to you. So please give the video a like and by all means, share the video with your friends. Now, coming back to lies, there are lies that we believe that we come up with on our own, and there are lies that we believe that come from external sources. I'm curious. I would like for you to go into the comment section and tell us the two biggest lies you think we Africans tell ourselves. Put it in the comment section. I am sure everybody's going to want to know what we all think, what others think, in terms of what are those two biggest lies. And you can, by the way, if you want to put more than two, by all means, but just give us at least the two biggest lies. And one final thing I would ask you, I'm going to pose a scenario. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on it. And the scenario is, so an African is given $1 million US cash. What do you think are the first 4 or 5 actions they're going to do with that money? And before you throw in education or educating their children, I'm going to assume that's one of them. So you can exclude that from the list of 5 or 4 reasons you're going to give, because I'm going to assume that every African is going to at least want to educate their children. So put that result in the comment section. I am curious to know what you think Africans are going to do with the $1 million. If you were given that $1 million, what would you do? What would you do? All right, let's get back to the lies that Africans tell ourselves. One of the lies we tell ourselves, it doesn't, on the face of it, it doesn't look like a lie. And that is African governments are corrupt. That's the first thing we normally see. Every time we try to start a business, every time we have something positive to say about Africa, someone comes along and drops that bombshell. African governments are corrupt. Now, you say, that's not a lie, that's true. That's absolutely true. African governments are corrupt. Well, yes, they are. And here's the deal. Since you know African governments are corrupt, and I know African governments are corrupt, and everybody knows African governments are corrupt, why are you sticking it into the comment section? Why is it always coming up? Because you're not informing anybody with this by saying that. Most people already know that. So what is the intended effect that you're looking for putting a statement like that in the comment section or as part of a comment or a response to something? So it's not to inform, okay? Because most people will know that. One reason why people say this statement or make this statement is an implied thing. And that implication is that African governments are irredeemable. They are corrupt and they are irredeemably corrupt. Therefore, one should not expect anything from them. Now, if that's the reason, that is a cop-out, because the reality is this. If we believe that the governments are irredeemably corrupt, then there is nothing for us to do. We don't have to hold them accountable. And if we don't hold them accountable, who's going to hold them accountable? That means they can do anything they want. And that, my friend, is not how we develop Africa. Each of us have to hold the government accountable. We, the people, have to hold their feet to the fire. We have a responsibility to make sure that we do that. The next reason why it's put in these sections, or it's put in when we're talking about doing anything positive in Africa, is to discourage us. It's put there to discourage us. You know, again, if you look at that statement, you're going to see it almost all the time when people are talking about doing something in Africa or doing something for Africa. That's going to always pop up. And the question is, when somebody makes that statement, are they saying that we shouldn't do anything in Africa? We cannot do anything in Africa? Because that's the only other reason to say it. We've gone through the other two. That's the only other reason to say it. In other words, we're discouraging each other. And here is the sad part about something like that. You know, many people are getting on the plane going to Africa. In fact, many Africans want out of Africa, while many people are running into Africa that don't look like you and I, who are going there to create fortunes for themselves. And here's the thing. We don't normally tell these people, you know, that statement. We don't make that statement to them. So they don't get discouraged. We get discouraged because we tell ourselves that. Yes, we are doing is sabotaging ourselves. At the end of the day, we are only hurting ourselves repeating that statement. So, the lie is the implications from that statement. The actual statement itself is a statement of fact, but it's said in an environment to create an impression, a negative impression, which is where the lie actually is. Okay? It's the negative impression that is created on us. And the fact that we shouldn't hold our governments, that's the other part of the lie. And its intended effect is to prevent us from doing what we as citizens should normally do. Hold our governments accountable and not get discouraged when we start in business. The next big lie that we tell ourselves is we don't have money to invest. We need the outside world to come in and invest in Africa. And we say it in such a way that we don't make any distinctions. So I'm going to make some distinctions because that statement or that belief is not healthy for us, and it's actually a lie. And let me explain what I mean by and why I say it's a lie. If you look at the United States, some 95% of the businesses in the United States are small mom and pop operations. The vast majority of American workers work with small mom and pop operation. These are tiny little businesses, many of them. You know, the Googles, the Caterpillars, the Microsofts, these companies that we get to know, Facebook, these big juggernauts, they employ only a small number of Americans. But they get 99% of the visibility. And people believe that every business in America is big. It's not big. Just like in Africa, most businesses are small. You know, in Canada, it's the same ratio. In the United Kingdom, it's the same ratio. The vast majority of businesses in these countries are small. And so, what do we need from an investment perspective? Well, how do most of these businesses in the United States get started? Did they start with money from the bank? Did they start with money from investors? No. The vast, overwhelming majority of businesses in America start with savings that people have in the bank. Savings that they have in the bank. They didn't start with some big fancy source of income. They didn't start with an investment portfolio. They didn't start with any of those things. And the other thing I'm going to tell you, majority of these businesses couldn't get a penny from the bank when they started. Nobody would give them any money. Not one dime. But you know, when you talk to small business people here in the United States, they'll tell you, as soon as they started making money, the banks come along and says, hey, how much money do you want? The banks are literally throwing money at these companies now that they're making money. But when they started out, no bank to be seen. Take that and transcribe that over into Africa. The vast majority of businesses that Africa will have will fall under the same essential category. Small business. You know, oftentimes when we hear governments in Africa signing deals, they're talking about massive investments in raw material resources. For example, mining bauxite or oil or diamond or something like that. Governments and their corruption usually involve those kinds of activities for the most part. But that has very little effect on someone who saves some money and starts a business on their own. That's not to say that there is not local corruption. There is local corruption. But what I'm saying to you is the belief that Africa doesn't have the money is a misnomer. You don't believe me? Okay, let me ask you a question. If you recently have driven through the streets of Lagos, or Abuja, Nigeria, or Mombasa, Kenya, or Nairobi, maybe Lusaka, Zambia, have you looked at the roads recently? Have you seen the kind of expensive vehicles these people are driving? The Range Rovers, the Land Rovers, the Mercedes-Benz, the Lexuses. Have you seen some of those vehicles? And a few McLarens and a few Ferraris. Yes. The people in Africa are living well, many of them. Not a lot are poor. But what I'm getting at is there is money in Africa. Now, you remember I said earlier that the $1 million given? Well, let me break down in as far as I could tell how the average African would use that money if it comes into them, $1 million cash. The first thing they would do, and remember we said that we're not going to account for the education because a certain portion of that money is going to educate their kids. That's a given. The first portion of that, the biggest portion of that is probably going to be to build or to buy a house. And they're going to build that house in a really nice neighborhood. That's going to probably eat up roughly around half the money. But really nice neighborhood. And then the next thing they're going to do is go out and buy themselves a nice luxury car. A Mercedes-Benz, a BMW, a Lexus, or a Range Rover. After that, they'll take a nice vacation and go to Dubai, for example. And take Instagram pictures and send back to show everybody, look, I have arrived. I'm living the good life in Dubai. And when they come back, or before they leave, they'll also use some of that money and they'll buy fancy clothes. They'll buy maybe Dolce & Gabbana or Versace or some, maybe Birkin for that matter. They might buy a Birkin bag. But the bottom line is they're going to buy luxury items. And then, to top it off, they get themselves an iPhone. An iPhone. The average person can start a business for under $1,000. $1,000 US. Remember, the vast majority of business in the United States are small business. The vast majority of business in Africa, whichever country you're thinking of, are also small business, and the amount of money to start them is minimal. Here's the deal. You see, I'm going to relate a story to you that was told to me, but I'm going to take out the country just to make sure that everybody can see, the story itself, the implication of the story. And as I understand it, there were two kids who went overseas and they were sending money back to their mom in Africa. Sending money back. And they've lived overseas for quite a few years. So one day, the son calls up the mom and says, Mom, I noticed you're not calling me and asking me for money. What's going on? And the mom says, I don't really need your money. I'm okay. And the son kind of scratches his head and gets a little concerned because something isn't right here. He's not sending the money. So he calls his sister and says, are you sending mom money? And he says, she's saying to me that she don't really need the money. So what's going on? They become concerned. And so the son decides he's going to fly home and go check on the mom. When he heads home, a cousin picks him up at the airport and takes him to where the mom is. On the way there, he sees a whole bunch of cows on the side of the street. And, he was looking at that and he was saying to himself, oh, that's a lot of cows. Whoever has that have money. So anyway, once he gets home and he sees his mom, he says, Mom, look, my sister and I are concerned because you're not asking us for money. And the mom says, I don't need your money. And the son says, why don't you need my money? And the mom says, listen, when you started sending me money home, I took a small portion of that money and I saved it and I used to buy a calf. And that calf grew up and that calf had calf. But as you kept sending me money, I kept buying more calves. Eventually, I had enough cows, 29 to be exact. I don't need your money at this point because I'm self-sufficient. The mom started a business with the money. Now, how much money do you think Africans send home every year? Billions. Billions. How much of that money do you think goes into investment? Almost none. The bottom line is the mom was a businesswoman in the making. And it didn't take a lot of money for her to start her business and grow her business. Let's come back to the $1 million that's given. So they buy the house, they buy the car, they take the vacation, they buy the fancy iPhone and all of that stuff. What's missing from that picture? What's missing from those options? Remember we said that a portion of that money is going to be used for education. So that's not what's missing. What's missing is there's nothing there about investment. There's nothing there about taking that $1 million and figuring out how to take that $1 million and make it into 2 or 3 or 4 million. The typical African doesn't think that way. And the reason is because we were never educated that way. Ask yourself a simple question. Why do you need to go buy a Mercedes Benz? Why do you need to go buy a Range Rover? Because long before Africans have money, they see commercials, billion-dollar commercials, telling us about these fancy, exotic cars and the people who drive them. And they paint a picture. The picture is if you have a Lexus, if you have a Range Rover, if you have a Mercedes Benz, if you have a Ferrari, then you must live in some big fancy house. And when people see you in that vehicle on the street, 99% of them will believe just that because they were indoctrinated to believe that. But do you know that the vast majority of people who are driving those vehicles, that's the biggest asset they have? Yes. They can't afford it, but that's the biggest asset they have. If they were to lose that vehicle, they can't replace it. The vast majority of them. But when you see them in that vehicle, if you ask the typical African, what do you think, what kind of a house do you think that person lives in? They're going to say, some big mansion somewhere. Yes. And that is how powerful these lies are. They tell you that you have to go out and consume the thing. That is how you tell people you have arrived and you have value. No commercial out there talks about when the person who started Land Rover went to the bank and tried to get a loan and the bank says no. Nobody's going to tell you that. They're going to show you the fancy house and the fancy car parked in front of it. They're creating an impression in your head. When you see the commercial and you don't have money, it becomes an aspiration. Aspirations are personal. Aspirations are part of you. So they create the aspiration long before you get the money. And as soon as you get the money, you live out the aspiration. What if you took that money and invested it someplace or in a business, in a dream or an idea you have, maybe a furniture business or something? What if you took that money and invested it in there? Africans send back billions every year, and almost none of that is invested. That lady is an anomaly, because most people will just take the money and consume it. Africa needs foreign investment. It needs money to manage and to create and to work with some of our natural resources like oil and like diamonds, the big, maybe a copper mine or something like that. We need billions of dollars to come in for something like that. We're telling ourselves and we're believing the lie that we don't have the money to do that. I read somewhere where psychologists say that when you believe a lie and you believe it for a very long time, you embrace that lie and it becomes part of your modus operandi. It becomes part of your core belief. It becomes part of who you are. And let me tell you something. If it's part of who you are, you can just imagine how hard it is going to be to get rid of something like that. Having said all of that, I want to switch language a little bit and talk to you from the heart. Listen. In the words of my fellow Jamaican, the musician Bob Marley, his words were, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind. That means only we can free our minds. When we believe these lies, we're in mental slavery. It is a form of mental slavery. And so we have to emancipate ourselves from that. The other thing I'm going to say is, we Africans have to big up ourselves. You know, if we don't sing our own tunes, if we don't, sing our own praises, who going to do it for we? Who are going to do it? Nobody now going to do it. And if you don't do it, if you don't believe that your government supposed to do what is right, and you expect them to do what is right, then they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. You understand? So, and for the African youth, listen, big up yourself, because here the thing now. Here the thing. Uno no like the old people, uno different. Uno look upon things different. Uno see things, you can look upon your phone and see all kinds of things happening outside of Africa. And you get inspired by that, and when you take that inspiration, you use that inspiration to build yourself up. That's why I say big up yourself. Because if you don't big up yourself, nobody now go big you up. Alright? So, I am very optimistic on Africa. Africa are going to rise. In the next 20, 30 years, many people are going to look around and say, what the heck happened to Africa? How did it just expand and explode like that? Once success starts, it's going to catch fire. Yes, it's going to catch fire. And when it catch fire, that means it's going to spread very rapidly. Africa is going to do in 20, 25 years what it took China 40 years to do, or 45 years. That's why I am optimistic. And you see the people who like to put Africa down, don't come to me with that. I don't want to hear it. You understand? We who are trying to build Africa don't want to hear the people them who every opportunity they get and try to put it down. Because you know what? I'm going to big up myself, I'm going to big up my people, and I'm going to big up Africa. You understand? Alright, if you never subscribe to this channel, please go and go subscribe. It no cost you nothing. I may ask you now, give the video a like, a thumbs up. You are tell YouTube that this video a big sitting. Thank you for watching.